we need to look back 2010 as a trader in New York Stock Exchange for so many years. Which events do you think is the most unforgettable?
Well, I think the one event that stands out is the flash crash last May, where we had the market in one day sold off 1,000 points. I would remind your young viewers who didn't experience this, but the crash of 1987, the market sold off 22% in one trading day. So, on a relative basis, the flash crash, as disturbing and as dramatic as it might have seemed, was not nearly as bad as what we experienced in October of 1987. On the other hand, I think it does remind us, the flash crash, that because of all the automation, all the high-frequency trading, all the program trading, that the kind of markets that we all have to deal with today are different than the markets we were dealing with as recently as 2 and 3 years ago in terms of what moves markets. And today we have more computer-driven trading than ever before. Perhaps 50 to 70% of our daily volume is computer-driven trading, which to me says that we will have more flash crashes going forward. They will happen not for any fundamental reason, but for a mechanical reason. And I don't think, quite frankly, there's anything the government can do to fix it, because they created this system with so much computer trading, and this is just a byproduct of automated markets, unfortunately. So we as investors are going to have to learn to be prepared for that kind of risk. And I don't know how you prepare for it, but it makes trading in general, in my opinion, more risky. Another event which stands out was the the elections November 2nd. We saw a complete change in voter sentiment, voting the Democrats out of Congress, with a vast majority of Republicans voting in, the continued unhappiness with the Obama administration and their economic policies. So I think that it was, number one, a big event for 2010, and it's an event that took place in 2010, which we will feel the effects of in 2011 and 2012. And lastly, I would say, would be overall the market's ability to continue to climb this wall of worry, because the economic news, at least in the U.S., unemployment rate still at 9.8%, a housing market that is terrible, and yet the stock market is going to end up being up 11 up to 13%, depending on whether you look at the Dow, the S&P, or the NASDAQ, to closing right at recovery highs. So you had basically a good year in '09. After the sell-off of January and February of early '09, market closed up at a good percentage gains, and now we have another year with very, very respectable percentage gains back to back. And so the market continues to climb this wall of worry, and I think as investors and traders, we need to pay attention to that, because the market, in my opinion, never lies. It is a forward-looking indicator, and the market is telling us that there is positive news on the horizon.
Okay, about year 2010, I have a last questions about the evaluation of the performance of Federal Reserve and President Obama.
Well, I'm not in the position to comment on the Federal Reserve. I think it's a philosophical question. I personally would prefer that the Federal Reserve not create as much liquidity as they're creating. I think it tends to undermine the strength of the dollar, number one, and number two, in the long term, we will all pay a price economically for the easy money policies of the Fed. On the other hand, it is very favorable to the stock market and stock prices. So from that standpoint, of course, it's a positive. But I think if you step back and look at the bigger picture, I suspect it's going to turn out to be a negative. It's just a matter of how long we'll have to wait to see that. In terms of President Obama, I think that, of late there has been a change in tone, because he's, I guess, to a certain degree, a realist, and he realizes that he now no longer has both the Senate and Congress of the same party, with a big change in Congress. So it's quite possible that a lot of his policies will now be threatened. Now, whether or not they can be changed or repealed, that remains to be seen. But I think he's been forced, whether he likes it or not, to take a more conciliatory tone. And I think overall that's probably good for the country and good for confidence of the American people and good for confidence around the world. And politically, probably very expedient and the right thing to do. But I suspect that if you scratch the surface, that beneath that veneer, that public veneer, you find the same very left-wing president. And I think that the whole topic of mistrust and not having faith in his administration is still going to be a big problem for him going forward. And the angst, if you will, that we lived through for the last 2 years, I think will be with us, even if the message becomes a little more conciliatory. Whether or not all these programs that he put through can change, and whether or not we'll be able to deal with these huge deficits here, I really don't know. I mean, I don't see that in the cards. But at some point, we're going to have to pay the piper. We cannot keep kicking the can down the road. And I don't know if your viewers understand that analogy, but you just can't keep pushing the problems off to the next day. It's just fiscally irresponsible and politically irresponsible. It's not all about giving candy to people that want candy. It's sometimes about making the hard decisions, which is in the best interest not of a specific group, but of the entire country. And I think that's what the American people want. I don't know if they're going to get it from the Obama administration, but to the degree that they will, I think that would be a positive.
Okay, let's look forward to 2011. They're saying China is a little bit too much worried about inflation. Chinese central bank just raised interest rate. So next year, China's focus will be like soft landing. And Europe is in chaotic situation, still a long time to repair. So the focus will be come back to United States again. People are saying U.S. stock market will be the investment choice. And U.S. economy is going to be the best performer next year. What is your opinion?
Well, I think that the U.S. economy is still the world's biggest economy, number one. So clearly it's important what happens here economically. I think next year is going to be exactly the same with some variations of 2010. I think we will continue to climb that wall of worry. I think the economic problems are not going to evaporate overnight. I would agree to a certain extent that because things in the U.S. have been so sluggish that in theory, this could be the economy that could show percentage-wise the greatest potential percentage growth in 2011, and therefore it should be reflected in the stock market. But I'll get back to my earlier statement that the tape doesn't lie, and the fact that we've had 2 years of decent returns in the U.S. stock market, in spite of all the bad economic and in some cases political and geopolitical news, the stock market is telling us that it anticipates something good coming out of the U.S. economy. So I think if you had a bet, I would bet in favor that the U.S. economy will continue to improve. I think the risk of a double-dip inflation is probably limited, still there. I think inflation is more of a concern than deflation, and I think if the risk for the Fed and the risk for the U.S. economy, as it in fact starts to improve faster than anybody anticipated, in which case you're going to see a dramatic change on the part of the Fed, and you're going to see a dramatic change in U.S. interest rates.
Thank you very much. Until next year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.